Hello and welcome back to a Younger Theatre in Isolation series. I'm Sam Nicholls and I am very blessed to be here today with the great Chris Foxon of the equally great Papatango Theatre Company. Hi Chris, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Great. I don't imagine there'll be many people watching this who don't know who you are, but just in case, do you want to give a quick introduction about who you are and who Papatango is?
Sure. So I'm Chris Foxon. I'm the executive director of Papatango Theatre Company. Papatango are a new writing company. We specialise entirely in supporting early stage, often not exclusively debut playwrights, and trying to provide pathways into theatre and specifically playwriting for people who might not otherwise have easy or ready access to professional resources. So we run a range of completely free open access opportunities. Those include the annual Papatango New Writing Prize, which gets more average annual entries than any other playwriting scheme, as far as we're aware. We get about 1,500 a year, so about 3,000 over a 2-year span. We give feedback to every single entrant who wants it, and we guarantee one of those entries a full production, UK tour, publication, royalties, and a commission for a follow-up play. As well as the prize, we also run a resident playwright scheme that commissions an early stage writer and takes them through to production and publication. And we run a range of training, participation, and career development services through our Go Write and Write West schemes. Those include playwriting courses at regional venues, culminating in free public performances, workshops in state schools that help students see their work produced and published and professionally performed, a fortnightly online live chat to give advice to anyone who just logs on and wants to talk to myself and my colleagues one-to-one. And all of those are completely free, funded by Papatango. Everything we provide is free and open to anyone in the UK. And our motto is very simple, therefore. It's all you need is a story.
Fantastic. Well said. All you need is a story. Touching on the Papatango New Writing Prize then, the 2019 winner of the prize was Samuel Bailey, whose brilliant play Shook, which looked at the intersection between fatherhood and a young offenders institute, premiered by Papatango at the Southwark Playhouse in October and was followed by a UK tour. That production was nominated for 7 OffWestEnd Awards, including Best New Play, and was hoping to run at the Trafalgar Studios 2 from the 8th of April to the 9th of May. However, due to the coronavirus lockdown, this, of course, unfortunately has not happened. To begin with, then, could you possibly talk us through your experience of seeing this great bit of theatre, this celebrated bit of theatre, unfortunately be prematurely, closed?
Yeah, it was absolutely gutting, as it must be for all of us. And there's so many people who are now in a very similar position at the moment, who've seen work that is the result of years probably of effort and development, and so many different kinds of resources, financial and in terms of time and skills, going to waste. It's heartrending, really. The worst thing about it was, of course, having to tell our cast, our creatives, Sam the writer, everyone involved in what had been such a brilliant show, at least in our eyes, that we weren't going to be able to bring it back, or at least we weren't going to be able to bring it back in this transfer as had been planned. And I think what's particularly awful about it is that it's something that felt completely out of anyone's control. There's
Completely.
no completely. There's nothing you can pinpoint to as a learning experience. You can't say this was the mistake or the oversight, or this person or this organization has let us down. There's nothing like that. It's simply a horrendous situation from which it's actually, there's not a huge amount of learning one can take from it beyond simply being prepared, having whatever insurance, whatever contingency plans you can in place for the unforeseen. But it's not necessarily that useful an experience. And so sometimes disappointments can be really valuable and insightful. This just felt like a kick without any kind of boost. It was absolutely gutting.
No. On the matter of closing then, because I know there was a real confusion within the industry just before the lockdown was kicked into effect, when Boris Johnson advised people to not go to the theatre, as opposed to explicitly said, don't go to the theatre. In your experience then of, you know, running a theatre company, how did you respond to that kind of wishy-washy kind of in-between response?
Well, I felt like it's what most of us working in the arts already know: don't vote for the Tories. Yeah, it was a complete lack of leadership. It was,
Really?
yeah, utterly unacceptable. We've been expecting for about 2 to 3 weeks beforehand that the likelihood was that the show would not go ahead. When our esteemed Prime Minister made that completely useless statement, putting all responsibility onto individual companies and venues, nothing could go ahead. Everything was stymied because the nature of the contracts that companies and producers will have with venues. You have what's called force majeure clauses, which means that in the event of force majeure, of something unforeseen and unstoppable coming into play, no one is at fault, no one is liable. But when the government refuses to acknowledge that this is a force majeure situation and tries to pretend it's still a judgment call for individual companies, producers in place, you're not able to activate those clauses on either side. Neither the venue can nor the company can, without potentially making themselves liable for the other one's costs, which I'm not for a second saying anyone would have seen it like that, but legally speaking, you're not in a position to trigger that without there being genuine concerns. So it leaves people in limbo. It was, yeah, a completely exasperating call. It was not helpful in any way. And frankly, for us, we were quite lucky actually in some ways compared to other people's situations. You know, I certainly can't say that we did not have a bit of time on our side. We were still able eventually to get the confirmation the show was cancelled before we went into rehearsals, which means that although money has been lost, and obviously we've honoured the fees for cast and creatives and so on, we've not lost as much money as if we had to go into rehearsals and start expending on various production elements.
Of course.
But the length of prevarication before that decision is made, other people were not so lucky. I know other companies who went into rehearsals or even into production and tech weeks expecting the likelihood is that in 3, 4, 5 days the show would be pulled from them without their control, but not being in a position not to have to keep it going in case that didn't come across. I think going back to the point about learning, there is a good learning model, not necessarily for those of us in the industry, but those outside the industry, in terms of when leadership needs to make a decision. And from our point of view, that was tricky because I had to continually, or did my best, to liaise with our cast and creators to let them know what was going on. But quite often, all I could say to them was, we are waiting to see what a broader sector-wide situation translates into. For now, all we can do is try and control what we have at our end, but that's fairly negligible in the grand scheme of things.
No, of course. It seems like an utter nightmare to try to navigate all those different moving parts. Luckily, though, if there is a silver lining from the situation, it has been that £2,000 from the cancelled Shook production has gone into your Papatango's new isolated but open commissions. I'm assuming a lot of people already know what that is, but do you want to give us a quick idea on what isolated but opens is?
Sure. So basically, when it was becoming apparent that Shook was unlikely to go ahead, obviously we didn't yet necessarily know for sure it wouldn't, but we started to put in place other models, other contingency plans in case. And one of the things we thought of straight away is, well, we're not going to be alone in losing work. If this sector happens, work for 95% of people is probably going to disappear, whether you are a freelance artist, whether you are running a company, whether you are operating a venue, whatever role you're in, we're going to see work not being made, being cancelled. And we thought that that the most useful thing we could do as a relatively small company, relatively limited resources, was to say, okay, if we are going to lose this project, we will put resources and money into generating different kinds of work. And so that meant when we got the news, Shook was absolutely confirmed as cancelled on Monday, the 23rd of March. That's when the West End went into lockdown, including the venue we should be going into. We were ready and in place to announce the following morning a series of measures as part of this isolated but open Voices from Across the Shutdown initiative. And the key one of those was an open call out for people to write monologues of up to 5 minutes, so relatively short, on any topic, anything they wanted, which we would select 10 of, pay £100 to each writer, and then cast and pay £100 to each actor to self-film, which would make available for free online. And the idea of that was simply as an immediate gesture, an immediate statement of intent that although venues might be shutting down, that doesn't mean that work has to shut down. It doesn't mean that creativity has to cease. From our point of view, we're all about telling new stories, and I think we need those new stories now more than ever.
Oh, completely. At a time where there's such a void out there, getting those news stories out there it's important work. And in fact, the response to it has been incredible. I think I'm right in saying that as of April 1st, there were 2,063 monologues submitted. So a lot of reading for you to be doing. Yeah. But that is an interesting number because it is more, I believe, I'm right in saying that, more than the amount of people who applied for the Papatango New Writing Prize, the larger prize, if you like, in 2019. Were you expecting to see, more people perhaps apply for this? What do you think, this increase in applications tells you, or what can we learn from this amount of people?
Well, we certainly weren't expecting over 2,000 sent in. We had a fairly short window for application, 3.5 weeks, because we were looking to encourage and stimulate people to start telling, to start expressing fairly quickly. So we weren't expecting quite that volume, perhaps. It was brilliant that we got it, and it's been wonderful to read so many very different stories. But I'm not sure if it's necessarily directly comparable to the prize. The prize is open for 3 months of the year, and it's a call out for full-length plays, which, how long is a piece of string? That's a slightly tricky term. We do our best to give some guidelines towards it, but full length, basically. And I think that is quite a different ask from saying to people, simply create monologues. One of the reasons we pitched it as monologues, people assume it's because we're looking for something that's fairly small scale, simple parameter, and fairly cost effective. And I mean, yes, that's partly true, I suppose. We've seen a lot of similar monologue things being announced since we set this up, which makes sense. But actually, the reason for us wasn't first and foremost pragmatic. The reason for us was about access. We wanted to try and reach and inspire people who might not necessarily have the resources or the confidence or the time to sit down and write a full-length play, which is a hell of an undertaking. I mean, I've never tried one. Even I would find that really daunting. I've worked in the industry for years, and I've read thousands of the things. Whereas a monologue, because it's just a couple of pages, and it can be basically as close to prose as you really get in playwriting. You don't have to create a dialogic exchange. You don't necessarily have to have quite the same grip on the formal quality of a conventional scene. I mean, you absolutely can, but you don't need to. You can write what can just be a confessional, direct piece of prose that someone could then perform, can read off. We thought that was therefore probably a bit more accessible, a bit less daunting, and maybe therefore meant this opportunity would land with more people and be, I suppose, a gateway into perhaps thinking about writing for performance rather than the more, I suppose, what is still the most dominant of our literary forms, which is prose writing. So that's why we went for that, and therefore I think we weren't expecting that many, but I think looking at it retrospectively, I can see why we got 2,000 there and we get 1,500 for the prize. I think the prize, we will probably maybe see an increase next year if people have more times on their hands. I don't know, we'll find out. I don't think the prize is likely to top 2,000 per year anytime soon, just because if you look at all the other prizes out there, and there's a few now set up, most of them seem to get between 2,000 to 3,000 every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
We run every year, so we're a bit different. We get about 1,500 every year, so we get around 3,000 every 2 years. So there's a sort of a broad leveling across all of those schemes. So I think Isolated but Open has actually succeeded in what we wanted it to do, which is to reach a slightly different demographic and to engage people beyond the remit we're already reaching with the different schemes.
No, that's completely right. You know, I think it's easy to forget that a lot of people are going to struggle to engage in the theatre industry post COVID-19, and I think anything we can do, more specifically Papatango can do, to help make sure, though, you know, the hand is still out there, that people can still engage with it, is fantastic. In fact, the idea of engaging with people is being a big theme across Papatango's response to COVID-19, it would seem. Between Isolated but Open, you know, getting people who perhaps don't typically write theatre to write theatre, your brilliant Papatango Library project, #PT Library, in which you're sending out 60 plays into circulation for free, sending them out in bundles of 3 to your readers, asking them to pass it on to other users when they're done, and even offering to cover the postage and packaging if needs be for them. And you personally offering insights and feedback on how to apply for Arts Council England grants. There's definitely been, at least from my perspective, watching it all, a real push towards bringing people together during this time. Was that an important factor in Papatango's response, the idea that we should be bringing people together? Was that the impetus behind the project?
Well, I think it's actually really important for Papatango and all of the work, not particularly specific to the current coronavirus shutdown. We've got an informal policy in the office that everyone who writes to us, whether that's our email or social media, will get a response within 48 hours, which Fantastic. For a very small team who get a lot of inquiries does mean we're sometimes scrabbling like a hamster on the reply. It's why we run the fortnightly live chats, in which people come to us and they get to talk to us one-on-one in confidence about any sorts of advice they want, which we run every alternate Thursday morning. We've always tried to be open and accessible. We've always tried to engage with people who want to ask things. We've always tried to be there for people who might not necessarily have an easy route into or a natural understanding of theatre, because God alone knows none of us had a clue about it until we happened to drift into it through sheer luck at various points in our life. So I think that ethos is, I mean, we try it to the best of our ability. I'm sure we fail in some instances, but we try to the best of our ability to apply that throughout our work. In the coronavirus shutdown, I think we recognised that with Shook not happening, with that production on the back burner, in a way, a lot of our schedule opened up again, and therefore one of the best ways we could make use of that was to talk to other people, was to share whatever we had that might be useful. And I should say that I think it's been wonderful to see that replicated more widely. You realise in a situation like this that so much of the theatre community is a community. People are there to support and help one another. You see Bryony Kinney setting up Gig Aid to help support freelancers and pay people's rent. You see a lot of producers setting up advice services or chats or consultations. We see people opening up their archive. And I think actually there's a really concerted effort from so many people of whatever role across the sector to try and share and open and discuss. And I think that's always been there, but has often been a bit behind closed doors, or you've got to have the confidence, or you've got to have known that if you reach out to so-and-so, they'll reply. Or if you ask someone for this, they'll give you some advice, or you'll be able to get an acknowledgement. And actually, I think COVID-19 has suddenly pushed all of that really wonderful generosity and that willingness to support and share and be a community of supportive peers. I think it's actually put it front and center in a way that it hasn't been before.
That's such an interesting point, and you're completely right. You go onto Twitter, you see people saying, hi, if you want some help editing your show reel, hit me up. If you want some help doing X, Y, and Z, message me. It is. Oh, hello. Are we still connected? Sorry, my computer froze for a second.
Yes, it is. It is.
It is fantastic. Speaking on people helping each other, one great thing that we've seen from Papatango is helping with the Arts Council grants. Without going too deeply, perhaps into the politics of politics and the Art Council in general, how do you feel the response from the Arts Council England through these grants have been? Do you think the grants are set up in a way that is accessible and is capable?
Yeah, look, I think the Arts Council have done a really, really good and thorough and hugely committed job very, very quickly. They're in an impossible situation, let's be honest. There is, for this kind of the word, I mean, it's become terrible. We hear it buzzed around all the time now, but this is unprecedented. No one had any sense that this is how things would pan out. We still don't know what it's going to look like in 2 days, let alone 2 weeks. And for something like the Arts Council, which is a vast organisation that supports so many different kinds of work in so many different communities and so many different forms and audiences, it's a vast ship. You cannot turn a vast ship around very, very swiftly without creating some waves. And I know that, therefore, some of the programs that they've now put in place, some of the changes they've made, suspending the assessment of National Lottery Project grants, for instance, including people who've already made applications. I know that there are things there that are frustrating or that negatively impact some people. But unfortunately, I cannot see any way in which the Arts Council could have responded that wasn't in some way going to shake up how they previously worked and how people are used to them working. And I don't think they had any other option. And I think actually we should be incredibly grateful for the fact that they have pumped in all of their reserves to try and keep people afloat. They have done an amazing job in terms of readying their application portal and the incredibly complex assessment procedures that go into weighing up tens of thousands of applications. They've turned that round really swiftly. They've done it with transparency, and they have invested every penny at their disposal into trying to keep people afloat. I think we can always nitpick, we can always critique what people are doing, and I'm aware that there are things that are, for all of us who are trying to adjust to work, whether that's a scale like the Arts Council, a huge organisation, down to people like Papatango, who are relatively small. We will definitely get things wrong, all of us. But I think what's really important is to recognise that most things are actually being, I think, done pretty well. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a fan of the Arts Council. I think they've done a bloody good job in incredibly, unimaginably awful circumstances.
Oh, completely. I'm sure the Arts Council will be very pleased to hear that lovely response to you.
Yeah, if you're listening, we would like some money.
Send it across.
I'm joking. We've not got any applications into them at the moment, so we're sort of sitting pretty yet in terms of just being able to appreciate from a distance. So maybe that's why I can be a little bit less stressed about it.
I think appreciating from a distance is something we all should be doing nowadays, from a healthy 2 meters at the very least. Something that I'd quickly like to talk about is, in your interview with Lynn Gardner about the Isolated but Open and Papatango Library, all your package of ideas, she quoted you as saying, providing opportunity is not the same as creating obligation, which is very much true. That's undeniable. By opening with the Isolated but Open commissions, you're not forcing writers to submit. You're not gun to their head saying, all right, write something down on a page for me right now. But I think either consciously or unconsciously, you have touched upon a real conversation within the industry at the moment, which is this expectation of creatives and of people working in the industry to carry on pumping stuff out. There was this viral tweet that went around like 2 weeks ago that said, if you don't come out from this lockdown with your play finished, with a new job and with a six-pack, you're a failure as a human being. what, I suppose a question in two parts then. Do you think there's any merit to that kind of, all right, I have to be, almost obligation kind of thinking? And where do you think that kind of thinking comes from, that mindset comes from?
I'd say, first of all, I don't think there's any obligation either now or at any point. I don't think the fact that we're in lockdown actually has much of a bearing on that. I think trying to suggest that anyone is ever obligated to create is incredibly unhealthy and unhelpful. I don't think that's where good storytelling comes from. I also don't think good storytelling comes from people dying of tuberculosis scribbling away in a garret. I think good storytelling comes when people feel comfortable and secure and supported and well resourced. And I think there's a whole series of sort of really troubling myths about what it is to be creative or to be some sort of lone romantic visionary who can create and tell stories despite or because of challenging circumstances. Yeah. And I think that's all nonsense. People, whatever your job is, whether your job is overtly creative or mechanical, or involves manual labor, whatever it is, people work best when they feel secure, when they feel comfortable, when they know their environment. So yeah, I think it's incredibly unhealthy and unhelpful at any point to tell people that they should be obliged to be productive or creative because of external situation. Where it comes from, I would suggest, is very simple. It's because people are scared right now, and people are looking to control whatever they can control. And one of the things people feel like they ought to be able to control is their own productivity, their own voice, their own output. That's something we can control, whereas we can't control what's happening with the pandemic. But of course, that's an illusion, because as I said before, it's not just about us as individuals somehow getting our heads together and going through sheer determination, we will create. We are not unaffected by the situation around us. So right now in this kind of event, some people will feel more creative and productive. They will want the exercise, they will want the technical challenge, they will want the point of focus, they will benefit from self-expression. We know full well that to create and to express yourself has many beneficial much beneficial impact in terms of health and well-being. So many people will perhaps want to experiment and try that. For a lot of artists, it's a great opportunity not to have to generate product. As an industry, we're very good at saying to people, I really like what you did there, what's next?
Yeah.
Even with the best in the world, that's a question that comes up a lot. And what you're really doing there with the best will in the world, and I do it, and then I go, damn it, I shouldn't have done that. What we're really doing there is we're putting pressure on an artist to have more ideas, to generate more quality, to have more script to show, to have more to pitch. And actually, this enforced slowdown at the moment is a great chance for artists to have some time either completely off or to reflect on what they want to do, or not to feel like they've just got to feed that constant call for product, if you like. So I just don't think there's any one way that people can go about this. I do think some people will really benefit from and want to write and to express themselves, and will really find that practice helps them. I think a lot of people just won't want to put their heads in gear at all for that, or won't feel like they can. We've got to recognise that creativity comes with a set of luxury and privileges and resources around it. Many people right now are so worried financially, or are, as I am actually, in a tiny flat somewhere with no outdoor space. Many people are not going to feel like they've got those resources and the comforts that underpin creativity and the privilege that is, and therefore they shouldn't feel obliged to create. So in terms of what I said to Lynn, all I was trying to get at is, I think it's important right now that opportunities remain open. Work is disappearing. For us, we are all about creating paid opportunities for people to go for. So I think it's really important those don't diminish, or no one has anything to go for. But I think we've got to be very clear and very responsible about the fact that if opportunity is ever put as obligation, that is only a negative and impactful and damaging thing. And that's not just true now, it's true of any time. You know, people do not flourish when they are forced, when they are pushed to tell stories. That's not how it works.
Absolutely, absolutely, very well said. Taking a step back then, you've talked in the past about your disdain for gesture politics, which is established theatre companies and big institutions offering surface level responses to deeply rooted issues within the industry, as opposed to bringing around meaningful change. You wrote an article for The Stage in May of 2018 that was really great. I'd recommend viewers read that. But something that stuck out to me especially was you saying, whether there's a crisis to tackle or an anniversary to mark, the default seems to be arrange a panel event. But does this stimulate progress or substitute for it? Too often these are cop-outs for companies that should do more. In the wake of COVID-19, we've seen a lot of companies and a lot of venues especially do a lot to help fill in the void of theatre. The National Theatre very famously have their National Theatre Live at home sessions every Thursday, often linked to a fundraising page. The Royal Court is streaming their great play Cypress Avenue. Even Amazon Prime is streaming Fleabag for 2 weeks to help raise money for that. Without minimizing the obvious altruism of these actions and how great they are, and also the difficulties of the situation worldwide and within the industry, do you think this is enough from these big industries, or do you think there is the proverbial more for them to do?
So I suppose, first of all, I feel like, thanks very much for raising that article. I should point out, 6 months after I wrote that article, Papatango hosted a symposium at London City Hall discussing provision for new writing and so on. So I certainly don't think that talking about things or reflecting and interrogating things is empty.
Of course.
But I think the danger is that often those events they substitute for actual action. I mean, for us from the symposium, that was one of the things that kickstarted us to try and tour the prize winner every year. So 6 months after that, we put out our first co-production and the first national tour of the prize winner, which was The Funeral Director. We co-produced that with English Touring Theatre. Then at the end of 2019, we made sure that Shook, as part of winning the prize, was guaranteed a national tour, and it went straight off after its month in London for another few weeks. And we're trying now to make sure that touring work is a core part of what we do, and that stems from that symposium, that discussion. It stems from points James Graham made. We're also in the midst of trying to transfer more of our work from smaller studio stages onto main stages. Again, that's a direct result from the conversation that was had at that symposium. So I think that talking about, discussing, interrogating, asking questions is really healthy, really important, provided that you then try and incorporate some form of action or response to what comes up. And sometimes those actions or those responses are not possible for an individual company or organisation, and it needs to be sector-wide and bigger. But I think that too often we do see panel events thrown together, or conferences or symposia held, in which it feels like, well, this was an event we saw 3 years ago, and we'll probably have it again in 4 years done by someone else, and we'll retread the same ground sometimes. So I think that I would suggest that whenever we hold all these events, we try and commit, which is what we did. We wrote minutes up, sent it to all participants, and included calls to action that we were going to try and answer. I think it's trying to set yourself a challenge or a target of what is it leading to. In terms of the situation right now, it's a tricky one to answer. I think all the initiatives you mentioned there are absolutely brilliant. I, for one, have watched every single one of the National Theatre Lives.
Absolutely, here too.
So far. I think they've all been absolutely fucking great. Cypress Avenue, I've not watched, but I saw it at the court and I loved it. And I think everyone should watch that if they get the chance. All of these things, I think it's only wonderful that they are being made available and they are being shared. I think it's a really interesting question in terms of what putting those things out there mass publicly available for free for the first time, really, for free in people's homes is going to do for audiences who engages in future. I mean, I've no idea, but I'm going to be really interested to see what that translates into. In terms of that question about should big organisations be doing more, I don't feel actually like I can sincerely and honestly answer that right now, simply because I don't know enough about what their situation is, what anyone else's situation is right now. And I don't know actually what other plans they have in place and what else is coming out.
Of course.
And I think it goes back to my question, my answer earlier about the Arts Council. The bigger the ship, the harder it is to turn it around. For us as a really small organisation, you know, one of the reasons we could launch Isolated and Open within a couple of hours of the shutdown is because, well, with Shook being cancelled, that was one of our 2 productions for the year. With it being cancelled, even though we've lost money on it, we also, in a way, suddenly have money, cash flow that we were going to be putting into it, that's no longer going into it. So for us, it was simple enough to divert it because we don't have so many other projects on the go simultaneously.
Yeah.
We have more than enough for our small team, God knows. But we can be nimble, we can be fleet of foot, we can be reactive. When you are leading something like you mentioned the National, the Royal Court, they generate so much more work and have so many more people engaged on so many more different projects. I think it's natural that those organisations will take a bit longer to work out what their nuanced overall response is. And personally, knowing some of the people who work in those places, I've no doubt at all that we're going to be seeing some really exciting, some really constructive stuff coming out from them on top of what they've already done as the situation becomes a bit clearer. And actually, right now, I think for all my professional curmudgeonliness in the stage article, I think right now I've just been really impressed by what I've seen people doing. I've not looked at anything and felt, God, why aren't they doing more? Everyone is being hit so hard right now. Everyone is facing an existential crisis. And actually, I've just been really heartened to see that so much has been pumped into trying to generate supportive opportunities or open sharing of resources, despite the fact people are scared whether they're still going to exist. So no, actually, I don't feel right now like there's anything to point out and say more should be being done. I feel like actually we're seeing people rally in a really impressive, really moving way.
Fantastic. And you're so true. Like, it is very easy for us to look at the National Theatre and say, come on, National Theatre, do more. But your analogy about the big ship is so spot on. You can't imagine how many gears and cogs make up that machine and how difficult it must be to, change course last minute. You've also said in the past, and I think this touches upon perhaps Papatango's overall ethos, which is all you need of the story, is that new writing is nothing without new writers and new audiences. And we've talked about earlier, in this interview, about how much engaging with those perhaps under engaged with communities or individuals has been such a core part of what Papatango has been doing, both during the lockdown and in general. Moving forward then, past the lockdown, past COVID-19, hopefully when the theatres reopen, touch wood, what impact do you think COVID-19 is going to have on companies like Papatango, or perhaps the industry in general, in engaging with those new voices and new audiences? Because the last thing I think any of us want is, because of the industry, because of this shattering event, we suddenly lose the ability to engage with more and more people, to engage in these conversations.
It's a really interesting question, and I wish I had an answer. I would make a few observations there. I think, first of all, going back to what I said earlier, the fact that for the first time, really, we're seeing a real surge in some really top-class material being made, not just freely available, but available for people to access in their homes. So it's no longer simply that for a relatively small cinema ticket price, at least in some places, where I'm from, Newcastle, for a £5 you could get into a local cinema and see a National Theatre Live broadcast and so on. It's no longer simply that that things are being streamed or are available if you're savvy and you've got the know-how and you've got a bit of cash to access it. Suddenly it's freely available, being pumped directly into a screen in your own home. Now, that still doesn't mean that everyone has access to those things. My in North London, and a lot of the young people that they're trying to support don't have access to laptops or to screens or to good Wi-Fi. So there are still issues around resources and access, even in this sense. And we mustn't assume that putting something on YouTube means everyone can get to it. But nonetheless, broadly, we're seeing top quality work like the Nationals or like Cypress Avenue at the Court that is suddenly more accessible and available than it ever has been hitherto. And I think what's going to be interesting is whether, as we settle into a bit more time, so far there hasn't been much time for this, whether we see more targeted marketing and outreach to try and engage people with that and share that more proactively with people who might not necessarily know it's on. You know, people like myself, I know that what the National's streaming on a Thursday night on YouTube for the next week because I'm on theatre Twitter. That's circuit, or I'm getting mail out. But, you know, this is an opportunity to really engage with people who are perforce at home, who are looking for entertainment, and maybe to offer up something that people wouldn't normally engage with. I think there's a real potential there, and I'm sure that we're going to see some really wonderful marketing and audience development work being done around this. So an opportunity is going to be wrested out of the shutdown, I think. Also, in terms of the way work is made, the use of digital platforms, digital resources, it's not just sharing the product digitally, it's also about how artists choose to make that work and use digital resources and platforms.
Very good.
I think that is potentially going to really change the nature of work we see being created and put on stage in the long term. I also think it's potentially a great way of us, again, reaching different audiences of people who are not necessarily touched by traditional forms of theatre, because things are shifting. If we think about something like The Believers Are But Brothers, that was at Edinburgh and then came down to the Bush and also been developed at Sheffield, you know, really fascinating, very intricate, thought-provoking play that really interrogated the use of technology and audience interaction. We're all in the audience on a WhatsApp thread. Things like that at the moment still feel fairly niche. I think we could suddenly see surging and developing and a questioning of these ways we have of telling stories and using multiple platforms simultaneously. So I think that is going to really change the nature of who maybe thinks of themselves as a theatre artist, and the way the training or the resources or the skill set that you might feel you have to be on stage maybe is going to shift from, I went to Eton and then to RADA and so on. So I'm very pleased you've never worked with an Etonian. I feel very cruel. You know, we might see a shift in who thinks of themselves as artists because of the nature of the form changes. We might see a shift in audiences getting involved. I would also perhaps say that in response to how it's going to look in the future with what we're trying to develop here. I think all of us who go back into a theatre when we eventually can, hopefully soon, are going to have a very different sense of what it is to sit in that space as a community, and maybe a very different sense of what our community is when we next sit down. It's going to heighten our awareness of who is around us. And I think that is in itself going to be a stimulus for new and different kinds of work, because I think, not that I personally am necessarily a huge fan of audience interaction, I'm not actually, it's not quite my bag, but I think that may be partly because we've not seen it ever used, or at least I've seldom seen it used in what feels like a really clever, really fresh way. I think suddenly that heightened sense of us all being physically part of a room or a space, I think that is also going to feed into the nature of the work that's being made and the nature of the work we want to try and put forward in terms of how we engage with audiences in a physical shared space. Basically, it's shaken us up. I think it's stripped away some of the complacency, some of the things we've taken for granted. So I can't answer you what it's going to look like at the end of this, but I would be astonished if we really don't see at least a partial shift in the nature of the work being made and the nature of the audiences and the way in which we engage with it.
That's a really good point. And in fact, it echoes a lot of what Scott Graham of Frantic Assembly has said. Last week, a younger theatre was lucky enough to interview him as part of this series. Cheeky plug, go watch it. It's very good. But of course, as a physical theatre company, Frantic Assembly, perhaps more than a lot of companies, realize perhaps moving forward, the idea of proximity is going to be a really interesting dynamic to approach. Like you said, how are we going to get back to the idea that we're going to be sitting in confined spaces, shoulder to shoulder, with thousands of people without any sort of vetting about do they have the coronavirus? I remember at the beginning of March, I was still going out and seeing shows, and someone would cough on the other side of the auditorium, and everyone would initially just like squirm their seats slightly. So that you've touched on a really valid point there, which is we don't know how theatre is going to look, and we don't even know how it's going to be made. On that note, then, some conversations that have been coming up around online, especially with some really great projects that, like the Coronavirus Theatre Club, where people are performing monologues and online, written for the theatre, but also for this online space. Do you think that we're going to see perhaps a move away from the traditional venue experience? I know, I think there's always going to be a place for theatres in the theatre industry, it goes without saying. But between perhaps the popularity of stuff like National Theatre at Home, I think 2 million people watched One Man, Two Governors, which is fantastic. I'm not sure how many people have actually saw the original run at the National Theatre, but that's just, the numbers like that are incredible. Do you think we'll see like a movement within the industry towards perhaps more online spaces, if that's even possible for theatre?
Yeah, I think so. I think people will realise what a potential untapped market is out there. And we must remember that one of the chief challenges with theatres is, if we do say it's simply and purely about sharing a physical space, well, that's great, but most people in this country don't live in London. And guess what? That's where most of the theatres are. Where I'm from Newcastle. And Geordie in disguise, complicated reasons why I don't have the accent. But I'm from Newcastle, and we have a couple of great theatres up there, a couple of wonderful theatres, but that's it, a couple, and we're serving not just that city, but a big region. We're the capital of the northeast, really. At least maybe until you go really far south and hit Leeds and York. And I'm sorry, guys, you're basically the Midlands. I think there's got to be a recognition triggered by this, which is there is a huge audience out there, far bigger than any of us will ever get into physical spaces in a particular building.
Exactly.
Who want to engage and be reached. And they don't need a pandemic or a coronavirus shutdown to want that. I think there's going to be some really interesting work done around VR, basically. I think the challenge always at the moment is that when you do just film and record something, even with really top quality kit and skilled engineers and camera people involved, it's still going to be very clearly a camera version of something people are watching live on stage.
Yeah.
VR gives us a chance to bust through that a little bit, and it's still in its infancy. But I would be astonished if theatre from this doesn't really start to accelerate that use of new digital technologies like VR to really work out ways we can share what it is to be in that physical space, even if there are geographical or other access barriers to people getting there in person.
That's such a fantastic point. Also, I know currently a lot of criticism towards not necessarily the recording of the theatre, but when theatre is recorded, the person directing the recording has a choice on what the audience sees. It's you're looking at this person now, and now you're looking at this person, and here's a wide shot just to remind you where everyone is. But one of the magic things about theatre is that you can look where you want, you can focus on what you want, and you're completely right. Technology like VR will manage to bring that agency back to the audience, whilst also still marrying the benefits of technology. Yeah. Finally, then, and perhaps like on a separated and positive note, I think we've all got a lot of free time now, even those of us who keep busy. I suppose when you're not reading one of the 2,060 pages monologues you've got to get through, you're still going to have time on your hands. what would you recommend to people watching this? What would you recommend them to do? I know that sounds like a big question, but like, is there any activity you'd recommend to help, keep mental health great? Scott Graham last week in his interview, plugging it again, he said, go for a walk with your family, in a safe way possible. Really enjoy the sun, enjoy this moment to breathe. It could be related to theatre, it could be unrelated to theatre, but is there any sort of activity that you'd, perhaps recommend for people to do during this time?
I would say find pleasure in something you know you will enjoy. Do not feel obliged to take up something new. Do not feel obliged to seek out some model of productivity. If you know you will enjoy writing or creating or painting or piece of music, go for it. If you know, though, that what you're going to enjoy is actually digging out some old Agatha Christie's or some old box sets, and just having some time and space for yourself, do that. My top tip would be don't feel guilty. No one should. I don't want to say this is what I think would be a helpful move for anyone, because I don't think there is any kind of one size fits all approach. My top tip, just whatever, find what is going to make you happy and going to make you feel alive and happy in this really difficult time, and then do not feel remotely guilty about what you should be doing or what else you could be doing, or so and so's learned 4 languages, written 2 plays, and discovered that Shakespeare actually didn't write King Lear at all. Just don't feel guilty. Do what you're going to do, because creativity is a long-term game.
Yeah.
Creativity is not something you rush, and it takes years to tell good stories, to be able to create things. And part of that process is not sitting down, forcing yourself to do something that isn't coming naturally. Part of that time is giving yourself breathing space, imaginative space for your own well-being, and for your own self to grow. So yeah, I think my tip would be do whatever the hell you like, and wallow.
Yeah, what a lovely tip to end on. Thank you so much, Chris. For people watching, please go and engage with Papatango's online projects. I know 2 of your perhaps inspirational monologues, I'm not sure if they're actually part of the commission, are currently up on the Papatango website. You can find it through Chris's social media, through the Papatango social media. Also have a look at the other A Younger Theatre in Isolation interviews. There's some fantastic ones out there. We've got one with Simon Stevens, one with Lynn Gardner, one with Scott Graham. I don't know if I mentioned it, but there's a Scott Graham one. I'm not sure if that's come up yet. But yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Best of luck with the Isolated but Open commissions. I hope your eyes don't go by the end. I'm not sure what my joke is there, but I think you get my point.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right.